This is the Music Halls of Fame podcast. This week we honor the year in music for 2008 along with a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2008. We also ask the question, is it cool to actually be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Plus, our Spotlight Museum is the National Jazz Museum in New York City. Before we get going with the podcast, like everyone tells you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll know when these podcast episodes drop, which is usually every Thursday. Now, on to this week's episode. We are getting close to the time when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominations are announced. Couple of months, actually. It usually happens these days around January so that they can take advantage of the award season that's right around January, February. With all of that, though, has come the usual griping on social media and podcasts like this one, let's be honest, where we discuss who should or should not be in. Surprisingly, it's not just the fans talking about how this band got snubbed or why that artist got in instead. It's sometimes the artists themselves. For instance, Radiohead were inducted, but chief architect of the band, Tom York, said in the past that he didn't think that being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was actually cool. The same goes for Robert Smith, whose band The Cure were also inducted in the exact same year that Radiohead were. Tom York, by the way, did not show up for the induction ceremony, although two of his bandmates did. I've also made mention numerous times in the past of the fact that Iron Maiden should be inducted, but who doesn't want them to be inducted? Well, Iron Maiden themselves. Specifically, Iron Maiden's lead singer, Bruce Dickinson, the legendary master himself. In fact, Bruce absolutely hates the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and what he thinks it stands for. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is different from any other Hall of Fame, I guess. I mean, if you're an athlete, making it into the Hall of Fame at the end of your career is almost as important as winning a championship, and in some cases even more so. Athletes work their entire lives so that they can be called Hall of Famers. It's a source of pride. It's validation that they did a good job and got the respect of their peers. Basketball players, football players, baseball players, hockey players, they all want to get into their respective halls of fame. Some even break down in tears when they get the call or the visit from their hall committees telling them that they're actually going to get in. Watch some of those Football Hall of Fame announcement videos online sometime and watch how huge grown men suddenly turn into crying, babbling little babies over the whole thing. It's really emotional for them. It's the culmination of their life's dreams. Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine made the same analogy when discussing the hall during a show on Sirius XM radio recently, where he mentioned that kids growing up wanting to be in a sports hall, but musicians don't actually grow up wanting to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's just not a goal. Tom's thought was that it was probably because the hall doesn't actually put in artists whose fans really care about seeing them inducted. See, the aforementioned Iron Maiden, who should have been inducted years ago, Hall, just saying. But because the hall seems to have something against heavy metal music, I will say it numerous times, and it has been proven numerous times. Yes, I will say it again. The hall seems to have something against heavy metal music. Regardless, Iron Maiden still aren't in, and that right there is a shame and just goes to Tom's point. There could also be another reason when you think about it. Rock music is different in that its roots are based on rebellion. I mean, it came up from the blues and then in R&B and then got turned into rock and roll and the whole color thing, but I digress. To some musicians, being in the hall is a sign of conforming and or being corporate. I also have to figure that part of some artists talking about hating the hall has more to do with trying to look cool to their own fan base. Sort of a, yeah, we'd like to be in the hall, but that would really make us look uncool. So if we get in, it'll be with us kicking and screaming our way in, and we may not even show up just so we can look even cooler, like Todd Rundgren, who didn't show up for his induction. There are, though, some legit gripes about the hall itself. While Steve Miller's behavior during his induction was, to be nice about it, less than professional, he was right to talk about how people being honored have to pay an awful lot of money up front for a table. Same goes for Neil Young, who didn't show up for his induction for the exact same reason. Some reports say that the price tag for a table is $10,000. If that is true, then that is just wrong and definitely smacks of corporate greed and behavior. If the hall is going to charge crazy money for a table to someone whom they are honoring, then the hall should go to a corporation to have the table sponsored, like, say, the artists' record labels, who are all going to reap the benefits of renewed interest in said artist anyway and make back that money pretty quickly. Of course, there were some artists who spoke poorly about the hall and how they couldn't care less about getting in until the actual night that they were inducted. Geddy Lee, for instance, hated the idea of having Rush inducted until he went up on stage and saw how much his fans loved the fact that the band was finally getting in. The guys from Kiss felt the same way until the Kiss Army showed up at their ceremony. Same, by the way, for Robert Smith and the members of Radiohead who showed up. Only then did some of the band members realize the impact of their music and what getting into the hall had on their fans. And maybe that's the thing. See, to me, getting into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame not only validates the fact that your work will forever be remembered, it also shows respect in a strange but affectionate way to your fan base, especially the ones who were there from the very beginning when you were playing small clubs and could only get 400 people in, like I saw Pearl Jam way back when before Jeremy kicked in. In Iron Maiden's case, getting the band into the hall would show that heavy metal, especially their hardcore version of heavy metal, would be given the respect that it so richly deserves. Let me repeat that. In Iron Maiden's case, getting the band into the hall would show that heavy metal, especially their hardcore version of heavy metal, would be given the respect that it so richly deserves. I'm going to get this band into the hall even if it kills me. My God. In the end, that's what this is all about. Respect. That is why being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is important, because there are a lot of genres that will never get the respect of the hall voters, like, well, let's just say EDM, or virtually any type of dance music. Even with hip-hop acts being regularly inducted now, there are still a lot of voters who think that hip-hop doesn't even belong in the hall. I highly doubt that EDM will ever be in, aside from the pioneers of electronic dance music themselves, Kraftwerk, for whom it took forever to even be considered for induction, let alone to finally be inducted. To me, being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame would be a huge honor. It doesn't so much validate you as an artist, because you could have easily have just made music in your parents' garage, let it be your side hustle, and never release it to anybody. What it does do, though, is that it shows respect to your fan base. It shows all of those square pegs in the round holes who dressed in all black, even in the middle of summer, or who stayed home, put on your music with a decent set of headphones, and dissected your music like we were doing surgery, that we matter. If some artists can't show up for themselves, at the very least show up for fans like you and I, who stood by these artists for all these years when being their fans and not being in the hall was actually considered uncool because of us. For these artists that we love to finally be shown respect and get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's actually kind of cool. Before we go any further, we'd like to tell you that there is now a Music History In Depth podcast where we go more in depth on a few of the events that happened in music history for that particular week. The Music History In Depth podcast drops every Tuesday on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from, as does our Music History Today podcast, which goes over the daily events in music history. The Music History Today podcast drops daily, including weekends, on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, back to this podcast. The year was 2008. In music, Spotify started, first in Sweden, before, of course, eventually going worldwide. will.i.am created a viral song and celebrity music video using the words of then-presidential candidate Barack Obama's speeches entitled Yes We Can. A lot of musicians and other entertainers then got behind Obama, helping to propel him to the presidency later in the year over Republican Senator John McCain. Michael Jackson released a 25th anniversary edition of his album Thriller, which turned out to be the last album that was released while he was still alive. There would be a bunch of albums released after he passed away in 2009. Scott Weiland left Velvet Revolver. Tina Turner started her 50th anniversary tour. Madonna had the biggest money-making tour for a female solo artist at that point, with $280 million made. Taylor Swift and Beyoncé have since eviscerated that record. A fire on the back lot of Universal Studios Hollywood burned down a warehouse that held master copies for artists as far back as Louis Armstrong. The original master copies for some artists like Eminem were in the process of being transferred to digital copies when the fire occurred. However, a decent amount of the 175,000 master copies supposedly had made it through the process at the time before the other melted master copies got put into the realm of history, never to be recovered, unfortunately. All that legendary music gone. DJ AM and Travis Barker of Blink-182 were involved in a horrific private plane accident that killed 4 other people, including the pilot, when their private plane skidded off the runway. DJ AM would commit suicide a couple of years later, reportedly due to not being able to deal with the pain from the injuries suffered in the accident. Bands that formed in 2008 included Chickenfoot, Clean Bandit, Fun, The Saturdays, the Swedish House Mafia, and Selena Gomez and The Scene. Groups that broke up, of course, before their inevitable reunions or announced their hiatus included Hootie and the Blowfish, John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, Bauhaus, the Cheetah Girls, King Crimson, Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, Digital Underground, Ministry, Social Distortion, My Chemical Romance, Big and Rich, Incubus, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Westlife, The Police, Toto, Velvet Revolver, and the Spice Girls. Groups that got back together in 2008 included Ben Folds 5, Letters to Cleo, New Kids on the Block, Bad Company, Biohazard, Republica, Split Ends, Dishwalla, Dirty Vegas, Eraserheads, Jane's Addiction, The Fat Boys, Triumph, Space Hog, Stone Temple Pilots, Stetsasonic, Yes, Ultravox, and Yazoo, or Yaz in America. The best-selling album for 2008 was Lil Wayne's The Carter 3. Other artists having big years that year included Adele, Coldplay, Rick Ross, Alicia Keys, Madonna, Usher, Disturbed, Miley Cyrus, Amy Winehouse, Rihanna, Leona Lewis, Kings of Leon, Josh Groban, Taylor Swift, Janet Jackson, and the soundtracks to Twilight, Mamma Mia, and High School Musical 3. The biggest single of the year was Flo Rida and T-Pain with Low. 2008 was also the year that singer Akon did a cameo on a song to help out another singer who was just starting out, Lady Gaga, on her debut single Just Dance. Other big singles that year were by Coldplay, Leona Lewis, Katy Perry, Rihanna, Madonna with Justin Timberlake, Jason Mraz, Pink, T.I., Jack Johnson, Duffy, and the Kings of Leon. In country music, one of the biggest scandals of the year was country music singer Mindy McCready confirming earlier reports that she had had an affair with baseball player Roger Clemens that started when she was 15 years old. The other scandal was the affair by Shania Twain's husband, super producer Mutt Lange, with her best friend, her being Shania's best friend. Figure that one. That was also the year that singer Anne Murray retired from performing. As far as country music albums went, Taylor Swift, Tim McGraw, and Toby Keith each had 2 albums that hit #1 on the country music charts, as did albums by Kelly Pickler, Jessica Simpson, Alan Jackson, Julianne Hogue, Lady A, or Lady Antebellum back in the day, Darius Rucker, Sugarland, Kenny Chesney, Chris Cagle, Brad Paisley, Jewel, George Strait, and a Now That's What I Call Country compilation album. Big country music singles included Carrie Underwood's All-American Girl, Sugarland's All I Want to Do, Montgomery Gentry's Back When I Knew It All along with Roll With Me, Kenny Chesney's Better as a Memory along with Everybody Wants to Go to Heaven, the Zac Brown Band's Chicken Fried, Rodney Atkins' Cleaning This Gun, Darius Rucker's Don't Think I Don't Think About It, Alan Jackson's Good Time, and Taylor Swift's Love Story. In hip-hop, L.A. Reid became head of Def Jam Records, Twista started his own record label, hip-hop label TYT shut down but then was brought out of bankruptcy by the Orchard record label, Jay-Z signed his $150 million 360 deal with Live Nation, meaning that Live Nation got a cut of his touring, merchandise, and record sales. And unfortunately, that was the year that Nate Dogg suffered 2 strokes, which eventually led to his death. Big hip-hop albums that came out in 2008 included Lil Wayne's The Carter 3, T.I.'s Paper Trail, Kanye's 808 and Heartbreak, Young Jeezy's The Recession, The Games' LAX, Plies' Definition of Real, Ludacris's Theater of the Mind, Rick Ross's Trilla, Nas's Untitled, and Snoop Dogg's Ego Trippin'. Big hip-hop singles included T.I.'s Whatever You Like, T.I. and Rihanna's Live Your Life, Lil Wayne's Lollipop, Got Money, and also A Milli. Flo Rida and T-Pain's Low, Flo Rida's In the Air, Snoop Dogg's is Sensual Seduction, Jay-Z and T.I.'s Swagger Like Us, and Kanye's Love Lockdown. In dance music, Sonny Moore started using the Skrillex name when he started DJing in clubs that year. Ultra Miami Music Festival hit 10 years old. Dance songs that were big that year included The Prodigy's Invaders Must Die, Eric Pridz's Pajano, Chris Lake's remix of Sia's Buttons, Prida's Rack Funk, and Miami to Atlanta. Crooker's remix of Kid Cudi's Day and Night, DJ Fresh's Gold Dust, David Guetta's Love Don't Let Me Go, Bitches Amelie, Deadmau5's Reward is More Cheese, Not Exactly, Alone With You, and Hi Friend. Zoo Brazil's Kids, Chasin' Statuses and Plan B's Pieces, Thin White Duke's remix of Madonna's Miles Away, Funkerman's Speed Up, Ferry Corsten's Are You Ready, Nadia Ali's Rapture, which was originally from her first project, I.O., Hardwell's Smoke, Afrojack's Bungee, Justice's DVNO, and the Chemical Brothers with Hey Boy, Hey Girl. Dave Matthews Band member Leroy Moore passed away from an ATV accident in 2008. Other famous artists who also passed away in 2008 included Margaret Truman, not the former First Lady, Freddie Hubbard, Eartha Kitt, Odetta, Mitch Mitchell, Edie Adams, Jeff Healey, Richard Wright, Isaac Hayes, producer Jerry Wexler, Ronnie Drew, Johnny Griffin, Joe Stafford, Bo Diddley, Eddie Arnold, Robert Rauschenberg, Layla Genser, Jessica Jacobs, Klaus Dinger, Norman Smith, Ivan Rebroff, Yegor Letov, DJ K. Swift, hip-hop producer Johnny J, MC Breed, and also Henri Salvador. For the award ceremonies for the music of 2008 at the Grammy Awards, it was Robert Plant and Alison Krauss who were the big winners of the night with 5 awards. They won Album of the Year for the album Raising Sand. Record of the Year also went to them for their song Please Read the Letter. Song of the Year went to Coldplay for Viva La Vida, and Adele won Best New Artist that year. At the American Music Awards, Chris Brown won Artist of the Year. At the Billboard Music Awards, Taylor Swift won Artist of the Year. At the MTV Video Music Awards, Video of the Year went to Britney Spears for Piece of Me. The Soul Train Music Awards weren't held in 2008 because of a writer's strike. Carrie Underwood, Chris Brown, Katy Perry, Alicia Keys, Kid Rock, and Flo Rida and T-Pain won the music categories at the People's Choice Awards that year. At the Eurovision Singing Contest, which was held in Belgrade, Serbia, Dima Bilan from Russia won for the song Believe. Kenny Chesney won Entertainer of the Year at the Country Music Association Awards, and Carrie Underwood won Entertainer of the Year at the Academy of Country Music Awards. Duffy won Best British Album for Rock Ferry, and Girls Aloud won Best Song for The Promise at the Brit Awards for the UK. Nickelback won Best Album for Dark Horse, while Cardinal Offshall won Best Song for Dangerous, and Sam Roberts won Artist of the Year at the Canadian Juno Awards. Apocalypso won Album of the Year for The Presets, and Gabriella Cilmi won Single of the Year for Sweet About Me at the Australian ARIA Music Awards. At the Tony Awards, In the Heights won Best Musical, and South Pacific won Best Revival of a Musical. The Pulitzer Prize for Music was won by David Lang for The Little Match Girl Passion. 2008 was also the year that Bob Dylan received a Special Music Citation Pulitzer Prize. Musically, at the Academy Awards, A.R. Rahman won Best Song for Jai Ho from the movie Slumdog Millionaire, and he also won Best Original Score for the same movie, as Slumdog Millionaire racked up a number of awards that ceremony, including Best Picture. Elbow won the Mercury Music Prize for the album The Seldom Seen Kid. The 2008 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony was held that year on March 8th at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. At the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, harmonica player Little Walter was inducted into the Sidemen category. Songwriting and producing team Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff were inducted into the non-performers category. And that year's class of inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for performers included Leonard Cohen, Madonna, the Ventures, the Dave Clark Five, and this next artist. Before he was one of the founders of Farm Aid, before he was an inductee into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, before he was a staple on classic rock radio stations everywhere, he was just a guy with a made-up stage name who was just trying to not get booted off of his own record label. John Mellencamp was born on October 7, 1951, and was a relatively struggling rock and roller named Johnny Cougar back in the late 1970s. His first album yielded the minor hit I Need a Lover. His record company hated his next album so much that not only did they not release the album, but they actually dropped him from the label. They ended up releasing the album, of course, once he became popular in order to cash in, because that's what record labels do. Oh, greedy little bastards. Anywho, under his new record label and his new stage name, John Cougar, he released a couple of albums that had a couple of top 40 hits, like This Time and Ain't Even Done with the Night, which is a great song, by the way. The record label was pleased because, as John put it, the label thought that he was another Neil Diamond for some weird reason. John started working on his next album called American Fool, which, according to him, was 3 good songs and the rest of it was filler. kind of a common practice back in the day. The record company reps came to the studio to hear his new songs, including the good ones, and hated all of them. Their thought pattern went from getting a new producer to actually dropping Mellencamp from the label this time. Finally, cooler heads prevailed, and John was allowed to finish the album. One of his good songs, as he calls it, was a mid-tempo rocker. The idea came to him when he thought about something a friend of his had said about a visit to a chiropractor. His friend said that it hurt so good. Mellencamp used the line, traded off lyrics with his writing partner, and worked out the chords within a day. When the song was released, it became a huge hit. It spent 16 weeks in the top 10 and got as high as number 2. And the song, Hurt So Good, probably would have hit number 1 if not for Survivor's mega smash, Eye of the Tiger, being in the way at that time. Hurt So Good also got John a Grammy Award the very next year, and the album that it came from, American Fool, hit number 1. John Mellencamp has been nominated for 13 Grammy Awards, winning 1 in 1983 for Best Male Rock Performance for Hurt So Good, along with numerous Lifetime Achievement Awards from different national songwriting and recording organizations. John has released 24 studio albums, 2 live albums, and 4 compilation albums. Of those, 19 hit the top 40, with 10 of those going top 10, including 1982's American Fool, which hit number 1. He also released 75 singles. Of those, 52 hit the top 40, with 24 of those getting to the top 10 and 10 of them hitting number 1. John had great albums like American Fool, Scarecrow, Lonesome Jubilee, Big Daddy, Whenever We Wanted, Human Wheels, and Dance Naked, along with absolute bangers of songs, classics like Pink Houses, Jack and Diane, The Authority song, Cherry Bomb, Hand to Hold On To, Crumbling Down, Lonely Old Night, Check It Out, Paper and Fire, Get a Leg Up, Small Town, ROCK in the USA, cover versions of Under the Boardwalk and Wild Night with Michelle Indeggiocello, by the way, and a ton more, which finally led to his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I say finally because he became eligible for induction in 2002. He was nominated in 2004 and 2006 before finally being inducted in 2008. Still, not bad for a guy who was this close to being thrown off of his record label. Presented for induction by 1999 Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Billy Joel, John Cougar Mellencamp, basically John Mellencamp, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2008, and we have put his greatest hits onto this week's podcast playlist. The link to the music playlist is in the show notes. Our Spotlight Museum this week is focused on the quintessential American music form known as jazz. The National Jazz Museum in Harlem in New York City was first thought of in 1995 and was the brainchild of attorney Leonard Garment, who was general counsel to United States Presidents Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford, along with himself being a rather good jazz saxophonist. The museum opened in 1997 at 104 East 126th Street and stayed there until 2016 when it moved to its current location, which is at 58 West 129th Street, just off of Malcolm X Boulevard. Take the 2 or 3 train to 125th Street and walk up a few short blocks and then turn right onto 129th Street. There you go. The museum's artistic directors are Jean-Baptiste, yes, that Jean-Baptiste, and Christian McBride, and it has an awful lot of exhibits and memorabilia. However, its best-known collection is from audio engineer William Savory, who recorded radio broadcasts of many jazz greats using aluminum records in order to preserve his recordings longer. The museum has over 1,000 of these recordings and is in the process of digitally cleaning them up. They've released a few of them on iTunes as the Savory Collection if you want to purchase them. The museum is a Smithsonian affiliate museum. Suggested museum admission is $10. Their hours are normally Thursday to Saturday, noon until 5 p.m., and you have to have a photo ID in order to enter. However, if you can't make it to Harlem, they have an extensive, and I do mean extensive, online collection that you should absolutely check out. Go to jmih.org for more information, and of course, we're going to put that in the show notes for you. One person who was recorded by William Savory is this next performer. This man was the 9th out of 12 kids. His father came from Poland and his mother came from Lithuania. They met in Baltimore, Maryland, and moved to Chicago, Illinois, where our band leader was born. Their neighborhood was in the ghetto in the Maxwell Street neighborhood, and although the family didn't have any money, the father somehow managed to pay for his kids' music lessons as the kid became interested in music. While he was in Chicago, he learned from artists such as Johnny Dodds and Jimmy Noon. By the time he was 14, he was already playing professionally. His father, unfortunately, would not live to see his success. His father tragically passed away in an accident when the kid was 17 years old. After that, the kid moved to New York City and became a successful session musician. After a number of years, he got a band of his own together and started working the supper clubs, and also got on a radio show on NBC called Let's Dance. And there, the band started playing a new style of music called swing music. The radio show was popular enough, but became a victim of a strike and was canceled right in the middle of the Great Depression. And here is where history kind of takes a weird turn. The radio show lineup was such that the kids' band was on late in the evening, sometimes after midnight. On the East Coast, that meant that most people had not heard his new style of music or of the band itself, to be honest with you. However, on the West Coast, the radio show was live, not taped, which meant that people were listening around 9 o'clock in the evening to the show, 10 o'clock if you were in the Mountain Time Zone, which is still not too late in the evening. And it was in those time zones that the band and the swing style of music took hold. The band heard that kids on the West Coast had invented dances to do with their music, so they scraped some money together and went out on tour for the West Coast. And little by little, the music and the dancing went from the West Coast to the East Coast and began to catch on. And the rest is history. The music and dancing became a cultural phenomenon known as swing music, and its Pied Piper, clarinetist and band leader Benny Goodman, became the catalyst, but in 1938, he took it to a whole nother level. In a lot of big cities in the world, there are certain concert venues that are considered highbrow, for lack of a better phrase. Maybe stuck up is actually a better way of putting it. These are places where your normal garage band wouldn't be caught dead in. Hell, you almost feel like you have to get dressed up in a Brooks Brothers suit just to walk by the place. These places usually have ballet companies and classical music playing in them. New York City has a few of them, actually. Lincoln Center with the Metropolitan Opera House and Carnegie Hall. Carnegie Hall once was the main concert place for the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. It's a pretty prestigious place for a musician to play. That old joke about how to get to Carnegie Hall, practice, 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 that still rings true. It's a nice little feather in the cap and a bucket list item for musicians everywhere. It has since opened its door to other types of music, but this next event helped an awful lot with that. Back in the early part of the 20th century, jazz was not taken seriously in mainstream America. Looked at as black people's music, They weren't calling them black at that point. It began with the letter N. You can figure it out. Along with rock and roll, by the way, I might add, in the mid-20th century, same thing, looked at as black people's music. Therefore, neither one of those art forms were considered worthy of listening to, at least by mainstream America, we'll say. Jazz developed a following, but was not looked at in the same vein as, say, classical music or American standards. It took swing music and Benny Goodman to help begin to change people's opinions about it. In 1938, Benny Goodman and swing music were at the height of their power. Goodman was selling out concert halls all across America. He was a film and radio star. And one day his publicist came up with an idea. How about the band play Carnegie Hall? At first, Benny laughed at the idea. That's like Justin Bieber playing at the Metropolitan Opera House. It wasn't really gonna work. But then he kind of talked himself into doing it. He had not only his band, but he also had members of the Count Basie and Duke Ellington orchestras. Top tickets went for $2.75, which, when you consider inflation, would be $59.62 in today's money, which either way is a really, really good ticket price. Especially when you consider the times of the Depression, that was still going on at that point. And also you had the steady drumbeats of World War II coming ever closer to American shores. So Benny and the company weren't exactly playing for the poor folk at that time, because that was an awful lot of money back then. The concert itself was a smash, and although no one thought it was recorded, it actually was. You can get the concert on CD, as a matter of fact. What's now ironic is that jazz, which was once considered the bastard stepchild of, quote, real music, unquote, is now itself considered highbrow in many circles, including at my old university, the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where in our music education program at the time, it was drilled into me on the regular that the only real music was classical and jazz, and everything else was not, including R&B, hip-hop, rock and roll, psychedelic, etc., etc., etc. Be that as it may, Benny Goodman broke down the barrier when he held a night of jazz music at Carnegie Hall on January 16, 1938. It is the recording of this concert that made it into the Library of Congress National Recording Registry, and there's even more recordings of Benny's performance in the Savory Collection at the Jazz Museum of Harlem in New York City. The Music Halls of Fame podcast is part of the Music History Today network, which can be found under Music History Today on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcast from, and also on our YouTube page under Music History Today. Thank you very much for listening.